the
UGA.
UGA.
The county put him on the shelf.
Yes.
The county put him on the shelf. Oh, okay, because I guess my question was, is this a matter of a lack of faith in the UGA, or,
No, we've been waiting patiently.
and you've just decided to just, rather than continue to wait, to go ahead and,
I'm getting ready to retire. I put a heck of a lot more effort in me now. I've been doing a lot of travel for the last few years, so I'm able to be here more. I'm anticipating to be here more, so I'll be able to work on the project a lot.
Do you have a sewer system on that now? I mean, not a sewer, I mean.
Septic system.
Septic system,
Septic
yeah.
system,
What
yes.
sort of septic system do you have, since it was a business before?
The septic system is not, actually the business did not have
Septic.
rest facilities.
Ah, okay.
There was, that's strictly attached to the residence.
Uh-huh. So would you have to get a different septic system then?
More than likely, yes, because you would imagine that you'd have to put in some kind of a restroom facilities for personnel, customers as well as employees. So I imagine that would have to be upgraded to meet whatever requirements we're going to have at that time.
There is public water available to the site.
It is on public water, yes.
When did the store cease operation?
Pardon?
When did the store cease operation?
I think it was not too long after, my brother ran it, right? It was not too long after my mother died that he gave up the business, and it was probably around 87, 88, something like that.
So just before GMA?
Yes, before GMA. And when my brother really didn't care at the time, you know, when the notices went out, they were going to GMA this, and he kind of said, each their own.
So as you look at the comp plans, I think it's LNP 5.2,
right,
convenience crossroads. With small ones like Beaver Valley Store, Northern Store, single parcel.
yeah, that was included in the,
Parcel's big enough for, I think, to cover any need for increase in septic, drain field type area, as well as more than likely when we do get sewer, it's going to come down that road, down the line. We've got to follow gravity, and it'll come through there, so it'll be attached at that time. And I think it's still large enough that you just have a workable operation and provide off-road parking, off-street parking.
any more questions?
One more question. Water service is provided through the PUD. So you have one water tap.
There is one water tap. We'll have one water meter.
One water meter.
There is another tap at the corner of my property. Two taps at my property.
We got great
See, it pays to have an ex-PUD commissioner.
I can't speak for him.
You're talking about sizing up, you know, for increase on it. I shouldn't be, I think it's a 3/4 line. 3/4 copper.
So were you thinking of doing another service station or just a convenience store?
I think, I don't want to make the oil companies any richer. You know, I think I'd rather just have a convenience store. But, you know, it's not the master plan. You know, we're gonna work whatever works best for the needs of the community and for our own needs. It's a heck of an investment when you're dealing with.
Well, we've heard past testimony here about investing into a new septic system. That's quite an investment too.
Oh yeah, but we're talking that's a bigger operation than I'm dealing with.
Is this, assuming that we had a UGA, under the boundaries where this was originally passed, would this property fall within the designated commercial areas?
Yeah, it was going to be designated urban commercial.
Are the tanks still in it and for the pumps?
This was our official land use plans.
They haven't been pulled, so you don't
And it's
have any
meets the
trouble with
operator
them?
with you on, cease operating doesn't matter.
No, but that's, obviously that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
That is a liability in this respect.
So it's got the original tanks that are in there,
Yes.
so they were never updated.
No, those updates came late 80s.
Any other questions at this time? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, and the final site-specific amendment proposal that we're going to hear tonight is MLA 0685, proposed by the Port of Port Townsend.
And Kyle is the project planner on this as well. Kyle.
I guess I'll just turn it over to these guys. I guess Jim was telling me it's a couple parcels on the other side of Airport Cutoff Road that are going to be exchanged with a private landowner. And we're going to be basically swapping designations for EPF to rural residential for each of the properties.
We have here Larry Crockett.
Larry Crockett, Director of the Port of Port Townsend.
Can I ask a question before Mr. Crockett continues? Is this legislative or is this site specific? And for the record, I will recuse myself from any deliberation of this project.
Good evening, my name is Jim Pavarnik, I'm the Deputy Director of the Port and Property and Facilities Manager for most of Port Property. What we have here is a request that you probably won't hear very often, that's for a down zone. We have about 400 acres at the airport that is in the airport essential public facility. And as you're all aware, there are things that can be done in an airport essential facility. It's its own zoning column. We have a parcel of property that really is part of that facility, but it really doesn't service the airport. It's across Highway 19. You drive by it probably every day. It's in the corner of Highway 19 and Woodland Hills Drive. It's a heavily wooded site. It's a triangle about right here. Another site that you drive by at election time, and we get a lot of phone calls on, is a cleared site down here at the end of the runway that has political signs on it during the election. That is not our property. We've been approached by the owner of this property to swap land. In essence, we've looked at acquiring this property for some time, but he hasn't wanted to give it to us. But he has a need for this piece of property up here because his grandson built a house right here. And he wants to protect that view corridor and make sure development doesn't happen there. So he'd like to use that as a buffer for his grandson's house. The port would like this strategic place down here for buffering at the end of the runway. So we're proposing to remove this triangle up here from the airport essential facility and in exchange put this triangle in the essential public facility. And we will work the transaction. As you're aware, a private citizen can't own any airport essential public facility land. So we need to go through this comp plan amendment to make that paperwork work.
And actually, the property that we'll acquire here is an actual FAA safety zone. As you walk in, the runway is kind of a cone shape that keeps expanding, where you don't want any structures of any sort in case the plane has to set down an emergency. So that'll be incorporated in that no man's zone, if you want to call it that.
So the problem is that your triangle of land across the highway on 19 is currently essential public
Right,
facility.
under the current zoning of the
Because
county.
there's nothing that would prevent you from acquiring that property.
Right.
You would want
No, we could just buy it outright from
Right,
them.
right,
But this way, it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money.
right.
It's essentially the bottom line.
But he can't hold it because it's essential.
Right.
Straight across swap.
Well,
There's, he's gonna,
we're still negotiating. There is an issue because our parcel is heavily timbered. So
so
there is a timber value there.
that we actually might make a little bit of money on it.
Question.
The taxpayers will make a little bit of money. Which will be reinvested in these
You did say the word buffer, and that has many meanings to many people. With the wooded parcel there, would there be any restrictions on it in terms of development or trees remaining or anything like that?
Our commissioners, in the meeting, when they gave us the authority to put in this, wanted us to, in our negotiations with Mr. Seaton, at least talk about some kind of conservancy. We don't know what that would mean. Obviously, if he's going to be paying us for all the timber on that property, he's going to want to do something maybe with that timber. So that's in negotiation.
And it really, not an arborist or forester, but even to the untrained eye, it really should be at least thin. There's a lot of deadfall and that sort of thing already now. So. But it's, that corner right as you go up Woodland Hills on the right, the access is actually also Woodland Hills, is already an access road there.
Once again, what the size of the
2.5 acres.
And nobody can put political signs anymore. Right.
So they just move up, they just gonna move up from the
It's got to be one party specific, so I'm sure the other party will vote. It's really pretty straightforward. That's really all there is to it. There's no utility issues, there's nothing to be built on.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, normally we would move on to the suggested amendments. As I mentioned earlier, the specific focus of this meeting is the presentations of the amendments as part of a joint workshop. And since we do have what is obviously extraordinary circumstances here with the turnout, we're going to take this time to take some public comment on what we've just heard. I want to reiterate, this is not a public hearing. These comments are not for the public record, but will be incorporated into the Planning Commission minutes. There's a number of people here who have marked maybes, so once again, if you could keep your comments very brief for the purposes so other people can speak, and also for the purposes so the Planning Commission can still have time to address some of the other items as agenda. It's not often that we have the privilege of having the Commissioner's direct ear here, so we would like to...
Could you please ask the audience if everybody had a chance to sign in?
Yeah, has everybody had a chance to sign this? Okay.
Keep the top sheet.
So what I'm going to do is just go down this list, and once again, if you could keep your comments brief to 2 minutes and possibly 3 minutes if it's really necessary, it would really be appreciated. So first we have, this is hard to read, George Sickle is a maybe.
Maybe, let's wait.
Okay, Gloria Allingham, also a maybe. Don and Diane Coleman.
Yeah, I think they answered my questions. I had some environmental questions environmental questions, and I've got this book from Puget Sound Action Team that talks about low impact development, how to tell them how to do their engineering and stuff, but I just like to pass this book on to them so that they can use those ideas as well in their planning.
Thank you. Jean and Nancy Thompson.
I guess we were on the brochures. They pretty much answered most of the concerns and questions that I might have, except I would like to get another brochure. In fact, if they had any more of them, could be about some more details about the project.
And I do want to again repeat that as it's ongoing, there will be more opportunities to gather information, and so to make that clear. Boy, I can't read this at all. You have any?
Maybe Eugene Brown, the right?
No further comments, thank you.
Okay,
Butler,
Butler? Ron and Chris Stevens?
My issues were mostly environmental, and if they follow through with what they promised, I think they're pretty well covered.
Okay, thank you. Joy Beige? Dowd? John Dowd?
I don't see him.
Okay, Bob Herbst?
Gentlemen, I have a question for you, and I realize for those of you that don't know me, I am the fire chief down in Brinnon, so mine is specific to my employment. But one of the things that was discussed in your presentation was the fire suppression system. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression that your Class A effluent from your sewage plant was going to be supplying your fire main system. Was that correct?
A portion of it.
A portion of it. Okay, so that brings me to a two-part question. One, the fire main suppression system, will it be a gravity-fed system or will it be a pump system?
We aren't that far in it yet,
Okay.
but likely will be a pump system, and staff will be also trained on site to use the portable equipment.
Now, with regards to that, what kind of, if any, at this point, I realize it's early in the process, so bear with me here, but what kind of process, if any, has been taken into account as a backup in the eventuality that your sewage treatment plant, for whatever reason, goes down and you do not have the effluent output to maintain the system?
That is premature, and that is absolutely something that we will have to take into account.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you. Arthur Bell?
Oh, just a small point for the application. It's Jeannie Moore and Ray Annabis, and not Jeannie Bell.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Schultz? Donald Hatler? Jeannie Moore? Heinrich? I apologize for not giving the full name. Some of the writing is difficult to read. Sandy Mackey?
I think you've already heard, that's the team, you've already heard from us. I've used my 3 minutes.
Joni Hendricks?
Yeah, here. I just have a concern, considering that the Hook Canal has the problem with low dissolved oxygen. I'm concerned with runoff from the golf course of the pesticides and fertilizers. So that was my concern.
Thank you. Carrie?
Do you have the materials on the Audubon rating system? No, but I can get them. Yeah. Because this will be an Audubon rated course.
Herb Beck?
No.
Elizabeth von Zonderveld?
No comment.
Ted Lobby?
Yeah, I don't have any comments at this time, but I would encourage the project applicants on the Black Point Resort to do outreach to the individual tribes that are affected in this area, and that includes Port Gamble Squam tribes, Kokomish tribe, there's a rep from that tribe here tonight, and also the Jamestown Lower Elwha Squam tribes, because this area fronts directly on a major shellfish beach for the tribes. And that needs to be talked about up front. The tribes are co-managers of that resource with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, among other concerns that the tribes have. And I would encourage you to have those discussions early, and I can provide some contacts.
That would be great.
Okay, Jack Turner.
Just to echo Ted, Jack Turner with the Skokomish Tribe, and just to let you know I'm here. And I imagine with the EIS there'll also be some addressing cultural issues, but within the usual custom area of the tribes. You know, we're interested in shellfish spawning, and and water rights issues that we'll be looking at. So, thanks.
Okay. Carrie Peterson.
I'm Carrie Peterson. I'm a Brinnon resident and also representing the Better Brinnon Coalition, a nonprofit in the Brinnon area. And I would like to submit a letter addressing some environmental concerns that were previously brought before the hearing examiner when this was proposed as a master plan resort, and given a determination of non-significance by the planning staff. And I believe that those issues remain to be addressed. And I'll give a copy of the letter to you.
Thank you.
And also to the commissioners and planning commission, bringing to your attention that particular document. That's, you may need one copy. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now there's, I think we've got, now at this time, is there anybody else?
Yes, I did sign on here. I think there's two more people. I see Linda Tudor signed also.
Okay, well, Linda Tudor.
She's gone.
Okay, and would you like to?
Lawrence, I'm Lawrence Dimino. I'm a Brinnon resident. Oh, is Linda here?
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In behalf of my son, when my husband had the road made through the property, he made sure it was over on one side, so there wouldn't be an argument to get back to the DNR area on our place. And we have lived there over 50 years.
This is the Austin property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm Lawrence Dimino. I'm a Brinnon resident. And I'm looking at this development and thinking that this could be immensely positive for the community. It could also have some negative impacts if everything is not considered, and I see how, you know, we're certainly considering environmental impact and satisfying all the requirements of the Planning and Development Commission, and they seem to be doing a good job at that. But I'd like to see some consideration being made for the economic impact in the town itself, and some planning to be done for that. And I did send an email to Garth Mann at the Statesman Corporation. He did return my email and told me to pick up a brochure. And I believe we need to have some organization, which I intend to do in the town, so that we can have some coordinated development planning going on in the town with the residents that live there. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but 1,100 units, if the valuation of the units, what would that valuation be? Sandy, would that be $200,000 per unit, 300?
Well, I won't speculate, but these are not inexpensive units.
That would be several hundreds of millions of dollars for the development. That's a very large development, and no doubt the property values around town will also go up tremendously, and that will invite others to do developments in town. And it would be nice if the folks that lived in Brinnon could share in that development, and I think they can if we can work together with the Statesman Corporation, at least coordinating some information so that the local people can do some co-development on their own in town. It would be nice to get some assistance with development in Brinnon as well, as far as water system and things like that. Even if they're not paying for the system, they could certainly provide some assistance with engineering and maybe lobbying with the state for grant money for a water system and things like that. Anyway, I wanted to bring that to the attention of everyone because you're all here. And as I said, I've been talking to a lot of people in town for quite a while, and there are a lot of people who are very concerned about this. This could be a wonderful thing for Brinnon. I'd like to see it happen. I'd just like to make sure that we all look at all the angles and do the best job we can so that it really works out well. It's not just you know, a big project that brings in a lot of tax dollars, we can do a good job of this if we work at it.
Thank you.
My name's George Sicko. I was the first one on the list, and I said a maybe, and since Linda isn't here, I was on the Brinnon Sub-Area Planning Group that put together the Brinnon Sub-Area Plan. The third version of it, the one that was accepted by the county and merged into the comprehensive plan. It was in that planning document that we came up with the recommendation that Black Point be looked at closely as an MPR in the future. So having gone through that arduous process and multiple public meetings, the majority of the Brinnon community was in favor of that. So that should be taken into account. If you haven't looked at the Brinnon sub-area plan, I recommend you skim through it. It's on their county's website, and you can skim right down to that area where it's talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on any of the site-specific amendments? Okay, well, thanks again for coming tonight. Much appreciated. Let's take a brief break. We do still have a lot of items to get to. Let's take a 5 to 10 minute here, and before we get started, Carol has something that she wants to say, but I would also like to say that this may very well be the last meeting for 2 of our planning commissioners, Alan Panasek and Phil Flynn. I think it's time to thank them for their terrific service, and as we all know, it's a volunteer job that requires a tremendous amount of attention and commitment, so thank you both so much. Cheryl, was there something that you wanted to bring our attention to?
Regarding the NPR proposal, the proponents provided us with just a few of this notebook. Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Few of this notebook that has some additional supplemental information. We only have 2 left. I sent one over to the county commissioner's office for you to share, and then we have 2 in the box here that you guys would have to share. I can make black and white copies. There are a lot of color documents in here. They don't print off in black and white really great, but they'd be okay.
Could I ask, are there more of these?
Mr. Chairman, we have a box with 16 in them.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
just gave them.
I can distribute them now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The crowd was too large this morning earlier to distribute.
We had a mishap with FedEx when they were sent down from Calgary, and they came to us in like shreds, and so we had to put a whole bunch of them together. So apologize for the delay in getting it to you.
So you each get your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, another notebook.
Very good.
I'll take one more.
You need one more right here.
What do we give you?
I forgot one.
Do we have enough to pass out to members of the public?
I need 2 held
Yeah,
back
let's-
for the 2
yeah, we
planning
need-
commissioners.
I'm one of those people. If that's all right.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we got enough to go around.
If you need it, I'll wait.
That's fine. Okay, now that that's been taken care of, we'll get to the 2 suggested amendments. The first is MLA 0678, proposed by Planning Commission member Dennis Schultz, suggesting the following. Unfortunately, Dennis is not here tonight to present his amendment, but I'll just go ahead and read the text here. And actually, that amendment presented by Dennis came out of discussion here in the Planning Commission, so we're all somewhat familiar with it. But the suggested amendment submitted by Planning Commission member Schultz goes as follows. Where there is currently a combined land use and zoning map that resides in the comprehensive plan, create two distinct maps. The more general land use designations for the comprehensive plan and the more specific zoning classifications and associated development densities to reside in the UDC. The result would be that requests for change in zoning density within a land use designation, for example, rural residential, could be processed outside of the annual comprehensive plan amendment cycle. Amendments to the UDC would continue to involve public review through the Planning Commission and a legislative decision by the Board of County Commissioners. Questions? Comments?
One question I have is when we get individual amendments to the comprehensive plan, each individual amendment might not have any significant impact. But my question is to when we get amendments outside of the comprehensive planning cycle, the cumulative impact, which is generally handled under the environmental impact statement, how would that be addressed? That is the only concern I have. So that if you have, as we do now, all of them come at one point, you can see if cumulative impacts, and then we can make a determination of significance or no significance. But if we're getting them in, 1 in April, 2 in June, there's a question about that, and it's something that I think we'll have to look at in the process.
Well, certainly. As I recall, the discussion around that involved the lack of, I don't want to say frequency, but the number wouldn't necessarily create an undue burden as far as creating individual impact statements. But the cumulative impact argument is a valid one. I think one of the main impetus behind this was, number one, to get it outside of that specific time cycle to allow landowners a more flexible schedule. It could also potentially be somewhat of a release valve for the planning staff not to have to address all of these. Like last year we had 9 site-specific amendments, all because they all had to be submitted by February 1st. So they're doing all this work concurrently. One result of this would be to spread them out more so that the workload would be spread out. I think one of the main ideas that came out of this is just the general belief that the comprehensive plan is a policy guideline document, and the development regulations are the implementing tool for that, and that maybe the comprehensive plan should just address a variety of residential densities, rural residential densities requirements in a general way, and really not lay out the specific way in which they're implemented, which is through the development regulations.
One point I think that we should make is that by going to this change, the intent is not to make it any less environmentally cumbersome, any less environmental review going on, but to streamline the process for which someone has to go through. So that, as anyone could tell you, the comp plan amendment process is large and cumbersome and tough to get through. And if we can get through the exact same reviews without having to go through that cumbersome process, I think we'd be doing a better job for the county. So the intent is not to allow something to have less environmental review per se, but less, I guess, administrative burden is what it comes down to. That's essentially the way I see it.
The dilemma I'd like you to wrestle with, I guess, yeah, maybe there's better words for this, but I wrote down responsivity versus certainty. Being responsive to that need for change, and yet that desire for certainty people have with zoning and what's going to happen next door, so that they make investments with some kind of idea that, well, I know what my community is going to look like, at least in the near future, versus the need to make changes to accommodate things. So I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I think a comment on that is I don't know that this is going to affect that certainty any more than the current process. It would change the timeline. But we're still going to have people requesting, whether it's through the comprehensive plan amendment cycle or the development code cycle. I mean, there is the possibility that zoning will change. The zoning that people are accustomed to in the adjacent areas could potentially change.
As a comment to this, also the fact that there's a precedent for this type of activity in other counties, and it does seem to be successful, and so again, that's another reason. It's been proven.
Mr. Chairman, may I address the Planning Commission with one other item? I did receive a call from a member of the public. I was specifically questioning how the notice requirements for this would be dealt with. And I think that in amending the comp plan, that one must need to look at the notice requirements if they are going to fall outside of the regular scheduled amendment deadline.
So it's it would still follow the same timeline as any type of amendment for the UBC. I mean, it would still be going through the Planning Commission, public hearing, and going to the board. You know, obviously, I mean, we could set up different times, and it's certainly, you know, time, you know, in between these meetings that we have to have noticed. I mean, it sort of works into about, you know, a 2-week cycle for us, you know, for getting things into the leader, just because, you know, they only come out once a week. You know, I think the minimum statutory requirement is 10 days, you know, so there's still, I mean, we can be at least, you know, a little more responsive, you know, especially in cases where, you know, we're just going rural residential, you know, increases in densities or decreases in densities, or if there's other rural residential zones that are created in the future, then those would also be, you know, easier outside of the comprehensive plan cycle for lands that we've already said that are appropriate for rural residential use. And it's important too to state too that all of your development regulations need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So if you're going to say that, you know, you want to get a rezone from commercial forestry to rural residential 1 to 5, you're not going to be able to do that. That's a comprehensive plan land use amendment. That's going through the regular cycle.
Right.
So there's still certainty and flexibility, I think, you know, and it's going to be, you know, balancing those two. It's like, how do we, you know, how much review is really necessary to say, you know, well, you know, yeah, we're going to approve that 30-acre rezone from 20s to 5s, you know, to use an example from tonight. So, I mean, and not only that too, I mean, there's a fair amount of review that's going to be gone through when it comes time to actually divide that property. You know, a lot of those impacts are going to be evaluated then as well.
Yeah, of the 5 different comp plan amendments that we were talking about tonight, 3 of them would still have to go through comp plan amendments. The other 2,
right, just 2 of them.
Streamlined.
And I think in our discussions, one thing that's come up is that that really brought up continually. The comprehensive plan was adopted in 1998, and the development regulations weren't adopted for another 2 years. So if you really look at the comprehensive plan, even after an update in 2004, there is still a lot of regulatory appearing language. And even if you look at the land use policy 3.3, which governs a lot of our real residential density change applications, I mean, if you read that, it really does read regulatory rather than policy guideline. And I think one of the intents is to really get more of that regulatory language into the regulation documents.
Well, maybe our commissioner here can contact the county and maybe get some testimony of how they streamlined it and how efficient that is. There you go. Would you like
Are
to?
you taking public comment at all on this? One time, if you do.
Why don't we wait until after all comments on this? Are there any more questions from the other planning commissioners or the county commissioners?
Well, when Sandy gets around to it, I'd like to know what it means to maintain a variety of rural densities.
The staff planner for this will be Kyle.
Okay.
That's the contact person.
Okay. Would you like to make a comment at this time?
In as much as I have 5 years worth of variety of rural densities tattooed across my back through Lewis County and Whatcom County, and sometime Kyle and I have a long lunch on it. I actually would encourage you to take this step. There's a hierarchy. Your comprehensive plan looks at your development potential out over the next 20 years. One of the things I like to say is that the comprehensive plan is the vision of the community that you'd like to become. The zoning ordinance is the real world. You got a capital facilities plan, which is going to impose limitations. You have other limitations. And you have population that you're dealing with now that you don't need to deal with your whole 20-year growth population in the first year. What you need to do is adopt the comp plan and the first zoning map together jointly so that you can establish what the criteria is for a zone change. And then within that, as long as somebody meets the criteria for a zone change, it's processed as a UDC zone change. We get the same thing where we discover that the text doesn't really work. So we go in and we'll do a text amendment. Well, in some places, the text amendment, if it's too tightly tied into the comp plan, you've got to go amend the comp plan to amend the text. This gives you the flexibility to do that. Your environmental review is handled two things. Number one, so long as the change is within the range of alternatives you considered for your EIS, my low density versus high density alternative, and you may zone to the middle to low to start with because you're in the first part of your 20 years. You don't get to the high density component until the end. You build in some flexibility to grow with adequate facilities. It's a good idea. It gives you some tools, frankly, at the project level and the application level. It's a pretty easy cut to go, this is within the range of things we considered before. It's an not administrative change, it's just a zone change. Implementing the comp plan, which is a 20-year plan. Or, no, this is a philosophically different approach than what we put in our comp plan. So I just encourage you to do it. I think we have too much unnecessary process that sometimes gets in the way of doing the right thing. And I'd like to encourage folks to be as efficient as you can, consistent with all the environmental protections are already built in.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments on this suggested amendment?
Nancy Duarte, Port Townsend. From what I just heard tonight, I'm not clear to what extent the process that's proposed is easier. I know it's more flexible for the applicants, but it's still being noticed, it's still going to 2 hearings, the staff still has to do staff reports. You know, I think it'd be easier for staff to, you know, put 5 on one piece of paper for one event than to come back and do 5 different pieces of paper on 5 different nights. I just don't see necessarily that this is any easier at all. Regarding you know, quickie rezones through the development process, I don't like the direction at all because it seems to me that rural density is one of the huge policy decisions that you make in your comprehensive plan. What David was referring to is the certainty of zoning, having the expectation of what your area is like and will be like, and not just, you know, the kind of upzones that we just seem to see as automatic. Easy, just ask for it and it'll be yours. I don't support that at all.
Are there any other public comments? Okay. Finally, MLA 0686, proposed by Jefferson County Department of Community Development.
So this is DCD's proposal, and Brent will be the project planner. Brent?
Yes. You might be aware that there is an effort, or actually mentioned in the Growth Management Act, that if the UGA does have mineral resource lands, there should be a mechanism set up to transfer the development rights away from the mineral resource land to outside. And what we've done is we're looking at creating a mechanism by which there can be transfer of development rights within the rural areas of the county. We have done a line-in, line-out change that specifically addresses how to change the comprehensive plan so that a mechanism can be established. One element that I think is fairly important to discuss is that when a person is seeking to rezone, that we would facilitate the process of rezoning so that we have several today, for example, where they could easily purchase the right for that rezone, as opposed to going through the comprehensive plan amendment process. They would be facilitated in a policy language that would be done through the transfer of development rights. So there is a net, one of the concerns is we have a public benefit rating system, and the public benefit rating systems throughout the state of Washington have various mechanisms of rating. There's no standard. There are variations of one standard. And the transfer of development rights could establish a mechanism by which the sending sites would be high in public value. And it would be, for the Jefferson County, it would be retaining assets that have been specifically listed in the comprehensive plan as values to save. And on the other side, the receiving areas would be, as we've seen today, persons that have come in specifically looking to upzone. And they themselves would have to fall within an area that could handle the additional, up the additional intensity. And that would be within the growth management. That's one of the hallmarks of the TDR program, is to make sure that it does not encourage sprawl, but it does allow this transfer within the rural component. That's just a short synopsis of I know that we have a committee meeting fairly regularly, trying to address the finer points of it. And some say the devil's in the details, and I was told to say God is in the details.
So the intent behind this, though, is to take those certain properties that are unique and have resources that need to be protected. There's environmental resources, and we have a whole list of the different environmental resources.
Right.
And then provide a mechanism so that the development rights from these properties can be transferred away out of those areas so that those areas will be protected in perpetuity.
Yes.
That's absolutely correct.
Because it appears that when you mention policy, you're talking about some of the changes in rural density, being policy language being written to involve a TDR program and assisting that. Most of the, and we've just discussed the subcommittees, but most transfer of development rights programs occur between sending sites in rural areas and receiving sites in urban areas. Now, are there provisions for rural to rural transfers that would accommodate the type of rural residential density changes that you're describing and some of this policy language change?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Most of the most common type of transfer development is from a rural area of Jefferson County to, for example, within the UGA, which is Fort Townsend. But there are examples that show that rural to rural or rural to Lambert and other areas that have more intensive use might be possible. We've already initiated discussions with CTEG to make sure that any policy language is rooted in what's allowable under the Growth Management Act. We want to make certain that when there's a rural to rural transfer is being proposed, that the policy is clearly established. We do have some line-in, line-out language that addresses that specifically, so that there is a specific set of policies that one must meet in order to qualify.
Could you state what the response was from CTED on that, just for clarification?
They said that one of the most important things is the areas that where the receiving area, one must look to make certain that there is adequate infrastructure for those designated, if it's a designated area, that must be looked at. So for example, if you're looking at the Glen Cove industrial area, for example, is that being to accommodate some additional growth, that there's enough transportation and water to accommodate the amount of increase that's being looked at.
We're very interested in another example in the rural areas, Quilcene. Herb was here. He lives in a flood area near Little Quill and Quilcene Bay, of high interest for salmon recovery, fish and wildlife habitat. And could he transfer that development right of his farm and some of his acreage to the Quilcene landward and provide additional density? We're very interested in that. We're very interested in moving from an ascending site in the county. Talked to Roger Short about this many years ago in his ag and his swan protection program. That development right into a UGA such as Port Hadlock. That's what, we don't think this is going to happen in a year. We would sure like to get this set up when the UGA is up and running in Hadlock.
That's one of the things in my research and other models throughout the country, and one of the recurring themes for success of a TDR program is this just designation of and a strong supply of receiving areas. And those exist almost primarily in urban areas, which indicates to me that the presence of a fully sized and serviced tri-area UGA would be an essential component to the success of a transfer of development right that could include what it sounds like, not just rural density transfers, but potentially commercial credits could be purchased. I've also seen that program used, I mean, most notably in Seattle, but throughout the country. So it isn't necessarily, am I correct in that commercial credits could be purchased along with rural increased density credits?
Yes, we did include a line in language specifically addressing that some of the increased densities could be commercial. But also should be noted the fact that other areas that are capable of having increased densities might potentially be master plan resorts. If they do have the requisite infrastructure, for example, removing development rights away from the floodplain or the fish and wildlife areas toward an area like the Brinnon Master Plan Resort might be a potential under an established transfer development approach as well.
I'll be honest with you, I'm having a hard time understanding. I guess I'm just thick, but if I'm transferring from a restricted area anyway, like a floodplain, I mean, I don't know what I'm transferring, quite frankly, but I'm going to transfer it to something that by definition is supposed to be densely populated. So we're charged with that fundamental responsibility anyway to accommodate the growth that comes into our community and to accommodate them in the growth areas. And if those growth areas can't no longer sustain that growth, then we need to make a change. So I guess I don't know. Planners know what it is that we're getting. I mean, what's actually happening there.
Well, even planners can't predict anything. I mean, there may be
instances.
instances.
No, in fact, I don't think we plan much.
There may be instances when developers, could actually want more density than we've designated for certain sites, want to get an additional unit or something like that. I'd also say too that it's listed under one of the innovative techniques under the rural element. I think that to go back and reread my GMA, but I think that our main concern is that we don't encourage sprawl. I mean, that's the policy guidance, I guess, from the state and the legislature.
So instead of getting 4 to 1 in the urban area to a transfer development, right, you can get an 8 to 1 density.
Right. Exactly.
And you buy it from a resource land like a piece of ag or commercial forest that's designated, and you transfer that development right for whatever dwelling unit to another rural site or UGA.
I guess one of the things that we've also discussed in our subcommittee is we're kind of used to it because we're, you know, it's what we deal with in our lives, but I'm not, the land use, the zoning regulations are among the strictest in the nation. And even a lot of these programs are successful back east because what you have is sprawling metropolitan areas going into farmland that can be developed into suburban densities, or even into forest land that can be developed into suburban densities. Here in Jefferson County, if you want to go into commercial forest land, you're talking about one building unit per 80 acres. There was just even in King County, there was an example of a successful program where they saved 400 acres of forest land and they were able to transfer 88 development credits, which means that the zoning was 1 to 5. Well, in a similar program here in Jefferson County, that would only be worth 5 development credits. So I guess one of the questions is with our zoning in place and with all the administrative attention required to work out the kinks of a transfer of development program, is it something that we need given the already fairly stringent protections, a lot of built-in protections we already have for our valued areas and habitats and so on?
One of the things I might add is that it's sometimes it's hard to judge when the jury's still out in certain programs. I recently addressed the research that's being done by one of the graduate students that recently came to our department that's analyzing all of the counties in terms of how successful the programs have been and how they are actually structured. And Clallam County, which is actually a county very similar to ours, has some of the most successful programs in terms of enrollees. And what I am trying to do in terms of looking at that example is to see what our county might be able to borrow from it so that the concerns that you've just mentioned would be addressed.
It'd be great if those were already tested at Growth Management Hearings Board, maybe a court level. One question I have is, do you envision a connection between the two areas? To use the example of Quilcene, Herb Beck's place versus downtown Quilcene, or floodplain Brinnon and Master Plan Resort. Would you see those being close by automatically, or would you see like the floodplain in Brinnon for Townsend being a trade?
Initially, I had envisioned that it would be an area-wide program so that something that is designated to be protected, maybe in Daybah Bay, there's a natural area preserve there, one of only 2 in the county. The areas adjacent to that might be considered to have such high value that this is an area to be designated sending that has a high public benefit. A receiving area from the property that is there might very well be up in Cape George, an area that is outside of the city, that is zoned 1 to 10, and it might be able to go to 1 to 5. And that would be facilitating a rural transfer. So a family that we've seen today that has children might be able to subdivide if it meets the criteria of generating an overall public benefit. And that is, and so in that terms, it is not encouraging sprawl because you actually have decreased the development potential in the rural area, in one part of the rural area, which would be the Daybah Bay area, but you've increased it in the Cape George area.
Is the city on board with this?
The city at the current phase has not, they have to do an amendment process for their comprehensive plan. And this year is not a year that it's not an it's an implementation year, I believe. Next year, 2007, is the year that they will make such types of amendments to their comprehensive plan.
Because they still talk about a rural community in Fort Townsend.
Well, they are talking about a Upper Sims Way project. I know that that's a big priority for them, and that's been bandied about as a receiving site for a lot of these development credits.
Is this mentioned in the countywide planning policies? Would there be...
Upper Sims Way?
Would there need to be an amendment?
No.
No, it's mentioned in the countywide planning policy. I think it's the rural element, and there's a specific mention to density transfer. It may not say, transfer development rights per se, but it does say density transfer.
Our goal is not to set up a situation for the city of Port Townsend.
No, you wouldn't want to do that. Here you got a UGA and a triangle.
Right.
You don't want to get into that.
No,
Well,
we're looking
just,
at
I'd
a
say it might be
development right
impossible.
technique to allow some transferring of those development rights throughout the county for various incentive reasons. And even the bank could be a cash fund, where you give up the swan habitat and you get $50,000. Might be another methodology.
Oh, I see a great need for it, especially on the west end.
Yes, actually.
I mean, those are huge floodplains there. And there's a lot of farmers that can't do anything with their land. So I see a huge benefit on the west end in particular. Yes.
I guess my feeling on all this is that the devil is in the details, and I gotta get a lot more comfortable with it, and we'll work through that process over time.
So what you're going to see is a staff report coming forward shortly, a public hearing before the Planning Commission April 5th, and then a discussion whether it should be even on the docket.
Yeah, because for instance, I'd hate to see someone transfer the development rights from one piece of property that we do want to preserve to another piece of property that we do want to preserve as well. That sort of thing. How do we prevent those development rights being transferred into a place that we really need to preserve? And we need to look at that too.
And I think another thing to look at that's a real reality, I mean, there are many merits to this, but we're also, maybe we'll get to some of this in the discussion on the work plan.
Sure.
But what are the priorities and how much staff time is available to devote to something that, while yes, we might like to do it, and it would be a great idea if we could, what are really, how much money is there, how much staff time is there when it could be devoted to other things. I know this came up, I think it was in 2004 related to the critical areas, and it was through no fault of the planners, but there wasn't, because we had the UGA and the comp plan update, and there wasn't enough time, staff time to devote to a critical areas update. And when there isn't enough time to develop to those statutory mandated things, is, once again, while you might want to do it, does it take away from really more pressing needs? I mean, it's just something to consider in the debate.
I sure like to have it ready for the Hadlock UGA.
That's true.
That's my goal. So, but discussion, we can have it. And we're going to, I think.